Well, hey everyone, thank you. Welcome. For those of you joining remotely, I'm Ryan Saddam, Client Savvy, Chief Experience Officer. This is CXps 2021, our Raleigh event. So we've got some great panelists here today who are going to share some stories about their journey in CX and some cool projects and initiatives that they're working on. We're also going to take some questions from the audience. So if you have any questions along the way, feel free to ask them during the process. We'll also have a dedicated Q&A time. For the benefit of those who are remote, we do have a microphone. If you would just, if you want to ask a question, pass it around, that'd be wonderful. So I don't want to take any more time away from these great panelists. So let's start off with an introduction. Can we start down at the end with Jennifer?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Karnichnig. I work at RTI International. It's a local nonprofit here in Research Triangle Park. And I lead the CX program, or we call it the Client Listening Program for the company. And then also my role is in the CFO organization in Transformation Office, focusing on learning and development. So wear a few hats at RTI.
Eddie?
So my name is Eddie Staley. I work with Withers Ravenel. We're about a 300-person engineering firm located here in Cary, North Carolina. We serve the entire Carolina region. My title is CXIO. I'm the Chief Experience and Innovation Officer for the company, and I coordinate with HR and delivery, all the different aspects of our company, making sure the client experience is embedded in all of our processes.
And I am Brandy Hobbs. I am the Chief Strategy Officer at Bell Davis & Pitt. We are a 38 attorney law firm here in North Carolina. We have about 75 people total. And basically anything that doesn't have a home is under my purview. So I catch special projects, marketing, business development, strategic planning, and also I'm trying to infuse client experience into the law firm.
Right. Well, on that, I invited these three panelists because they're each in a different place on their CX journey. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. But just to set the stage, can you just give us a little bit of where are you on your CX journey, Brandy?
So I personally feel like I've been talking about this and working with you guys and attending CXps for 6 years, and I'm feeling pretty confident. But I recently left a firm that I spent 4 years at, and so I would say we're really immature in our CX journey right now. Just starting to talk about what client experience is and bring it into the firm.
And Eddie?
Yeah, so I believe we started back in 2016. So I like to think we're in our, a little ways on the maturity model, although I often say we're a 5-year-old mature, right? So on how mature a 5-year-old is. But yeah, I feel like, we have been able to implement some really good strategies and get really good buy-in at the, at the employee level. And I think that's one of the things that was really the biggest struggle when you first start. I mean, you're starting over again, right? And just really getting all those stakeholders to be on board with that. So.
And at RTI, we started I wouldn't call it a CX program, but we started a client satisfaction survey in 2006, actually, before I got involved. And I think it laid the foundation for the program of people we have about 4,000 projects and about 5,000 people across, the U.S. and different countries. So I think that laid the foundation for people being open to asking for feedback. But it wasn't until 2017 when we really stood up a different kind of program that was much more about not just asking, but listening and then helping people, helping project managers engage with their clients. And so 2 of the largest business units that are part of the group that I support have now mandated that project managers use the client listening program and actively ask for feedback from their clients. So that's had a big impact, and that's just been in the last couple years. So we're just starting to integrate with other functions across the organization.
Yeah, and I'm glad you gave us that perspective because so many here are struggling with their communication efforts internally around their CX program. And I know one of the marquee things you've done at RTI is really stand up a good communication strategy internally around how to engage your staff on that. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So we started really working. I work with a group of business unit representatives who are influencers across the organization from each of the different scientific parts of the organization. They have insight into what drives the project managers. So we spend a lot of time focusing on the value proposition for the project managers, like why would they want to do this, and that was really important. Working with that group, we were able to come up with some campaign for, engaging business unit leaders and, getting buy-in. So we would present at staff meetings. We set up an intranet. We call it the Client Listening Program Resource Hub that has FAQs and training videos and all kinds of resources, links to all of the survey instruments, quotes from people who have actually used the program and learned things. So it was a very focused campaign to get the business unit leaders and then also the project managers and then everyone else in between engaged in what are we doing, why are we doing, and why does it matter to you? What's the value proposition? And I think that was the main thing that we really focused on. We had news articles. We also did all hands meetings with different groups. And then we had presentations to executives where people were able to share out what they were doing and why it was important at the very beginning. So we sort of piloted the program and then we reported out on that using many different tactics. We use, there's so many thousands of people and thousands of project managers. So we had to, not everyone looks at Yammer or looks at goes to the SharePoint site or reads the articles. So we had to hit people in many different ways. But then also we had office hours, we had live training, we had one-on-one consultations. Tomorrow I'm going to a group that is just now starting and we're going to go and do some Q&A. So it's a lot of stuff like that where we're really trying to meet people where they're at. And then I think the important thing is as we've gone along, we say we're all about feedback. So tell us, how is this working? Is this meeting your needs? Are you guys getting what you need as a leader or as a project manager to really help you have a better connection and engagement with your client?
Great. Brandy, Eddie, any comments or questions for Jennifer? Any thoughts on that?
No, other than I think what you're doing is fantastic because you have to get that buy-in all the way throughout the organization, and messaging is a really big important part of that. I know that's something that we personally struggled with is getting everybody to that same level of expectation and really trying to set that bar of where is it we're going to live, what is that brand promise that we're going to make that we're all going to agree that we live up to. And so that's really, really key. And again, you mentioned meeting people where they are. Understanding that and being able to get that messaging. I know something we recently have done is taken it, not just from the corporate level of messaging, but we have employees that actually record their client stories, and those are shared inside the company. So then you're hearing that from your peers in different departments. And again, it just kind of builds that CX community inside the company. So great job for the things you're doing. That is fantastic.
Yeah. And I was just going to say on the point of meeting people where they are, I feel like that is the underpinning of client experience, right? Like you start trying to meet your clients where they are by listening, but in order to get everyone there, you have to meet them where they are before you can even start that conversation internally and start building that culture.
Yeah, that was something someone said at the CXps virtual event a few weeks ago. The best way to lead this in your organization is to demonstrate it as a CX leader inside your organization. Any questions for Jennifer about what she's done with her client listening communication strategy? All right.
Sure, I'll
Got a question in the back here. All right.
My question is, what do you think the best way is to get the feedback? Because we've debated it in our firm whether it should be from like the CEO or the president or the leader of a department or the project manager. Yeah. And I guess we're trying to convince our group and get that buy-in And I think a lot of people are afraid to hear the truth. So I guess that's kind of my question is, how do you really get the good feedback?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you guys may have things to add too. I think that what we had to think about was we wanted the project manager to have the direct relationship with the client. So we felt like having them own that, asking for the feedback and then getting it, responding back to it, following up and sharing it with their leaders and maybe on up. And so we felt like that was important for us, partly because we have so many projects in so many different, areas. And we felt like that was more important than having someone else come in. We did try in one group, I think it was the DVP, division vice president sent out the surveys on behalf of the project managers, but it was not the same. It was a different dynamic, I think, because they thought, well, the client thought, oh, you're asking about this person and I don't know if I want to say anything. So we felt like that was setting up a dynamic that may not have been as conducive to the relationship and that direct engagement. But I think it depends on the number of project managers you have, how engaged the leadership is. Our leadership is highly engaged. They get alerts on every survey that comes in. They get reports now on the results. We just started doing that, where they're getting like a lot of information about what their clients are saying. But I think it's a really important question to ask. And the one thing I can say, and Ryan taught me this early on, people are reticent to ask for feedback because they're afraid of what they're going to hear. But we kept saying, this is not about you. This is not going to reflect on your performance. This is us. We are going to get this information as an organization, and we together are going to help respond to it, but it's not going to reflect on your personal, it's not going to reflect on their performance. It's about RTI's performance, and it's about the client perception of that. So we had to keep saying that over and over again in these messaging that we had. That was really, it comes up every single time we meet. So it's now like in our deck. This is not going to reflect on you. And I think that helped them come, sort of push back that, push through that reluctance. So I don't know if you guys might have.
Well, I will just say our experience is the opposite. So in a law firm setting, lawyers are notoriously non-confrontational. I don't know if a lot of people realize that. They, having the lawyers go out and ask the question and be trained to receive that feedback was going to be a really complicated, orchestrated, activity. And for small to mid-sized firms, we don't have project managers. We don't have marketing or business development resources that can be part of this. So we actually hired a group that typically attends the CXps conference, Wicker Park Group. And they came in and educated all of the professionals at my prior firm about what client feedback is and why you need to seek it and why you need to interview your clients. And so we actually started with client interviews. We didn't start with surveys. And we let our professionals identify people that they wanted to hear from. And we knew that we would have skewed results. We knew that these would be our favorite clients we have great relationships with, but we wanted to set the precedent that we're not looking to uncover some, shady business. We're just trying to build relationships. And the more feedback we get, the better we can do for those clients. And like you said, it's not about us. It's about the clients, what they need, and it's about how we can perform better for them on the whole. We have to start somewhere. And I think then it was infectious, right? The success is infectious because somebody said, hey, I didn't even know, but they were really stoked when we did X, right? Yeah. And that kind of spreads throughout the firm among the professionals. And so we did the interviews. I went and our managing partner went, and we attended together, and we would set it up in advance. We would do a complete debrief with anyone who had worked with the client previously. We would go interview the client. I would write up a detailed report of the feedback. All positive feedback was shared with the entire team, and any negative feedback was addressed with individuals on a personal basis, privately, so as to avoid any embarrassment. We didn't get a whole lot of negative feedback. We got some constructive, information, and we got a ton of positive feedback. And I think that kind of helped us build out the ability then to survey when we went through strategic planning. So, I think it just kind of depends on the group of professionals. And to answer your question, I think the culture of your firm will have a lot to do with it, right? Are we a closed environment where we don't want anyone to touch our stuff? Or are we an open environment where these are firm clients? And so, we all should have access to them. I think that determines the tack you have to take.
I agree.
Yeah, so to maybe help answer his question too, I got a question for y'all. You said something about being non-confrontational, so it brought some questions to mind, right? Most people, 90-some% of people are non-confrontational. I think you've all done feedback in some capacity where it either came from the leaders or it came from the relationship managers. I'd love to hear the difference in feedback that you found. Like as an example, I would imagine if I asked for feedback on one of my team members, I might get some truthy feedback, but maybe not truthful feedback because the people responding are also non-confrontational and don't want to get the person they're in a relationship with in trouble as an example. So did you see any differences when you've asked from leadership versus when you asked from the relationship manager?
I mean, I would just say that when you are in the relationship, right, you are the relationship partner, you hear what you want to hear, right? You hear the client was overall satisfied. The end result was fine, right? But I think when we did the interviews, we could kind of see the story behind it. There was trouble in paradise, and maybe we overcame, or maybe the end result ended up fine, but this was the backstory they wanted us to hear and have an inkling of. So again, not a ton of terrible feedback, but some really good information about like, hey, we could have avoided, any friction if we had done X or if this had been addressed previously. So I do think, I can name a couple of specific situations where having the relationship partner solicit the feedback maybe didn't lead to the findings that we needed to collect from that interaction, and having, third parties to the relationship there and just creating an environment where it was safe to provide that information was more helpful.
Yeah.
But again, I think it all depends on your culture, because like you said, there may be instances where the relationship partner is able to get more, from the client because the client feels like they're not going to get them in trouble. So
Yes, I agree. And I think in that one case where the DEP did ask, it was on very challenging projects. And so she was really wanting to get more information, but I think you're right. She did get much more, I think, than probably the project manager in that situation. And there's another group that does all of their surveys sort of centralized, but now project managers are saying, hey, I want to do it now. And so they're kind of getting on the bandwagon because they're finding, even with the third party feedback, it's very useful. So you kind of have to, again, start where people are at. If a certain group wants to do it one way, go for it. It's fine. Get it started. Go for the low-hanging fruit of like where people are willing to be vulnerable and ask for feedback. It's kind of, I think
the phrase I used yesterday is the coalition of the willing. Like you have to start with the coalition of the willing, the people who are ready to engage, and then again meet them where they are.
So Eddie, I know you're 5 years into your journey, and you also began CX around feedback, but you've taken a few steps beyond feedback. Can you tell us a little bit about where you are and how you got there?
Sure. And maybe to kind of piggyback on some things you said there too as well. The number one challenge was convincing people that it was not just going to be a drive of negative feedback coming, right? And I always go back to one of the things you've always said, Ryan, the scores don't matter, right? That's the client score. That's not a reflection on you. It's just how aligned are we to what that client expected. And so a lot of that messaging has to take place up front to really get that kind of buy-in. The other thing is, after we started getting feedback, I used to jokingly say, you have a 97% chance of meeting or exceeding our clients' expectations. That's what happens across our company. So once that barrier of I'm going to get bad feedback goes down, then things really accelerate. And so that was the first year, was really kind of getting over some of those challenges. The next thing we did is we actually set up a panel much like this with several of our trusted clients that we had basically spoke with them and said, hey, we really value you as a client. We want you to come in and share the good, the bad, and the ugly. on us, your experiences with other firms. We're going to put a room full of project managers, and we want them to hear what you have to say. And that was probably one of the greatest things that we ever did. It was letting our project managers hear the voice of the client, just much like we're doing today. And they each had Post-it notes. And as they would hear something, they would walk in and go stick it on the wall. And we captured that information all day. We went into breakout tables. We talked about specific things that happen in a project and how's the best way to overcome that. All of that data was pulled back, and it turned into our 26 fundamentals of client experience. And those 26 fundamentals, we focus on one of those every 2 weeks. They're also tied to our employee experience fundamentals. It's a nice little book that you used to keep on your desk. Now you keep it home with you at your home office. But and then that's where we do a lot of that messaging every 2 weeks as well. Again, where it's part of our corporate messaging, and it's also being shared in each one of the business groups. Kind of their weekly roundup type meetings. Right. And again, we're also sharing, peers are sharing their stories and how they're living out those experiences in video form, and that's shared across the entire company. So, again, how do you get this messaging out? It does take a coalition of the willing. I love that, and I'll use that at some point in time. But again, it's really about getting that ultimate buy-in and letting our individuals understand that the little things they do every day really matter, right? And again, we are technical people. We like to say, well, it was the best set of plans we ever turned out. It was gorgeous, right? That's great. But what was that client's experience on the backside? And it really is just about education and really getting people to join into that position of the willing. So.
Yeah.
And Brandy, you're a little bit of a different situation.
Yes.
Longtime CX enthusiast, new firm,
yes.
Just getting started. So what's it like being on the other side of the CX journey?
So I like to work in what I call stealth CX. And I've joked about this for years, but it's really hard to walk into a law firm where the majority of your clients who you are serving and educating are also your bosses. And so I've started trying to spread that culture of the little things throughout the law firm by just really focusing on the voice of the client and helping people see that each point of friction they experience is also probably a point of friction for their clients. So the billing process, if it's causing you trouble, it's probably frustrating for them, right? And very carefully getting them to see and recognize the client's expectation. And, in law firms, maybe 20 years ago, marketing and business development started becoming a real thing. And lawyers have finally accepted that business development is an expectation upon them. And now we're changing the narrative. Now we're saying, oh, you don't just go out and start new relationships or aim for client retention through business development. It's all about the client's experience. And I found very quickly that met a lot of frustration. People just weren't ready for that. So in order to meet them where they were, started infusing this conversation about the voice of the client into the business development conversation. I think that has helped us in a lot of ways. And I also think, I wanted to go back to where you were talking about like starting with the surveys and getting feedback. We started with interviews at my last firm to try and get people to recognize like our clients have something to say, we need to be listening. And then once they were comfortable with that, we were able to start on larger scale efforts like strategic planning. And we actually brought in Chandra Storston, who's here today from Visible Value. And she helped us formulate the questions for the strategic planning client feedback survey. So it wasn't just about the score, right? Or it wasn't about one specific project. It was, we're learning about our brand and we're learning about competitive intelligence and how we appear in the marketplace. So we were able to mix CX in with these other initiatives that were clearer and easier to understand for the people who had been running the business for so long. And so I think for me, trying to find ways to integrate the little things and not call it CX or brand it or have a center of excellence or, not identifying it and making it the elephant in the room has actually helped. In one specific instance, earlier this year, I've been at the firm 18 months, and I guess maybe this was 9 months ago. I had heard so many lawyers complain and so many staff people complain about the fact that we did not have a way for clients to pay their bill by credit card on our website. We told them on the invoice that they could pay by credit card, and then they had to call us or email us to ask for either a link or to give us the credit card information over the phone. I know that probably sounds archaic to most people in the room, but there was some internal debate about like, what about credit card fees, and is this safe, and what if they put money in the general account when we need it in the trust account? And I just kind of cut through the noise. Number one, I didn't really know the backstory, but number two, I was like, this is such an easy CX thing to do. And we did it. And almost immediately the feedback was positive, both from clients and our internal stakeholders, just saying, thank God, like, we needed this to happen. That is CX, right? That is removing friction on a part of the client journey. I've also tried it the other way, where we had a leadership retreat, you could call it. And I did a CX hour where we sat down in groups and we talked about client personas, and then another hour where we did the journey map. It wasn't great, I'm not gonna lie. It was a good starting point. It was a good way for me to see where the attorneys were in this particular firm, but it was so far from what they were comfortable with. It wasn't even a starting point, right? They put the journey map on the wall. We talked about suspects, prospects, clients, and advocates. We did get some good personas out of it, but I think it's just not where we were. So, we had to take a step back.
Yeah.
And we'll continue working on building out the dialogue, building out the culture, and then making CX, its own standalone thing, like Blake was talking about earlier. But you have to start somewhere.
Right. Any questions?
Blake has so many things.
Yeah.
You need the microphone, Blake.
Yeah.
I really don't.
I'm curious. This is just interesting for me to know. What did that do to your AR when you just put a simple button on your website?
So I actually do not have the specific statistics, but I do know it increased our payments by credit card, and I believe it increased our days to pay, or decreased our days to pay. Yeah. So, and for a firm like ours, right, we have 75 total humans. Almost 40 of those are attorneys. We have clients all over the spectrum. We have our individual consumer clients that are there for divorce, trust and estates work, property tax. And then we have this whole group of clients. They're massive corporations, insurance firms that have hired us to defend their insureds. So we've got people across the spectrum, and it may be a drip in the bucket in terms of actual collections, but for the clients who experience that release of friction and we're able to just start paying online immediately, now that's an advocate for our firm who says, oh, they are so easy to deal with, right? I get my documents, I get my invoice, I pay it online, and I'm done. I don't have to think about it anymore. And I think that is the point for me, right? Creating those advocates at the tail end of that journey, where I know that they're gonna both come back to us again if they have a legal need in the future, and they're also going to tell other people that we were easy to deal with, right? Not only do they love us and they love our work, but now their experience is better.
And for a firm your size, the cash flow helps the scale.
Oh yeah,
Reducing
absolutely.
days to pay helps you grow the firm at a faster pace.
Absolutely, and just understand where we are, right, in the life cycle or in the year. I also think it's just really important to keep that cadence of the conversation going with the client experience, where we start steering the attorneys, in my case, from client service. Like, well, we did the thing, right? We put out the beautiful document. We filed the brief. We did the things timely and we did them well, to how the clients feel about it, right? And you may have done the best work in your life, but if then after the case was over, the client couldn't freaking pay the bill, and then they got multiple calls trying to collect on the bill because they didn't have a convenient way to pay the bill, that is a terrible way to end that experience. And so, we're helping the professionals and the owners of the firm recognize the difference between the client service we provided up front and the client's experience overall is kind of key in our journey right now.
Yeah. So Jennifer, I want to ask you, because both Eddie and Brandy have talked about some of the outcomes of what they've done and feedback they've gotten. When you were talking about your communication plan internally, it was really focused around participating in the program. And now that you've got the participation up and people are engaged and interested, what are you doing next? What's evolving with your communication strategy to get towards some of that outcome-oriented thinking?
Yeah, so that's really good. I think, we shifted actually just this year to focus on follow-up. So not just, listening to our client or getting feedback from our client, but then what are you doing? What kind of actions are you taking? And so we've had a concerted effort on getting people to share their stories, kind of like you were saying, video stories, or sharing. We did a report out where we had like 10 people come and they shared wearing different hats. They were project managers or leads for an agency, and share what they learned from their client, and then how they're making changes on their project, but also what kind of changes they're making on their project that could be exported to other projects or maybe of the same kind. We work with, for example, in the international development space, we work with U.S. Agency for International Development. That's one of their biggest clients. So something that works maybe in the Philippines may also work somewhere else, but that's a conversation that those groups can have. And so we're getting to a point where we're able to have people share out their stories and share their lessons learned on what worked, and so they can share it with other people who work in that same space. So that's one thing. The other thing is that we have agency team leads, so it's similar to what you were saying, client. Well, I don't know if it's a client success manager role, but it might be someone who's over all of NIH or all of CDC or CMS. These are government agencies, but they for most of them, there's one more, DoD. But they have now they're much more engaged in looking at the results and looking at what are we hearing, what are we not hearing, what groups are we not hearing from, what do we need to do with those results. So I think from an outcomes perspective or results, that we're having groups within the organization really focus on a client by client group, like at the macro level. So not just at the project level, but at the macro level, and then share with each other those, they're called strategic account executives, but that sharing what they're learning. And we're just starting that. So we're starting to do that. And then I think the other thing, and you mentioned like connection, like stealth, I wrote that down, stealth CX. There's a lot of momentum around, and we've started this from the beginning, but connecting what we're doing to quality. Now, a lot of these are internally focused, but it's in response to the feedback that we're getting. But feedback that we're getting related to quality, related to schedule across the board. We're taking a focused effort on looking at schedule, looking at quality, and we have quality champions within the business units, and we have now a project manager center of excellence. So we're trying to link what we're doing with the PM Center of Excellence, with the quality group that's across the Institute, and also have connections to like the project manager training. So we're trying to integrate everything we do, like as far as a best practice. And it's kind of stealth a little bit, but it started very sort of gradually here and there, and now it's under an umbrella in one of the largest business units under a PM Center of Excellence. And so there's a lot of sharing across the organization and with the agency team leads on what's working, what's not working, and how can we make changes at, it might be different for one client to the next, but there might be broad changes related to schedule that people are talking about in a very open way. So I think that's the main thing, is that we're really trying to leverage people's experience, but bringing up a level, looking at the client by client to affect outcomes. So that's great.
Yeah. And Eddie, I know, speaking of outcomes, one of the things you pulled out of your feedback was this idea of a client success manager role that Jennifer just mentioned. You want to talk to us about that and how you've used that feedback to create that role and shift some impacts and outcomes for your clients?
Sure. So I'm going to start off by saying we implemented client success managers because we're selfish people. And what I mean by that is this. One of the greatest challenges we're facing in the engineering world today is really just talent, really trying to find a lot of resources. And again, in the past, we were very much a seller doer type model. So you, as a project manager, you were expected to be technically competent. You were expected to manage the client relationship. You were expected to build new business. You were expected to manage the staff that report directly to you. It was a lot of things that these people had to do. And, from the engineering world, trying to find that project manager that could do all those things was really, really difficult. And so what we started doing is, how can we basically segment the way we work? Let's go find really good technical, competent engineers that love the work, know the work, enjoy working with their peers, managing their peers. But the whole client piece is just that's not their thing, right? Sort of what you were saying on the attorney side, right? And that's okay. We now have a place for those individuals inside the company. Then on the other side, with the client success managers, these are people that thrive on making sure that the client experience is really, really good. They also thrive as acting as mentors to other staff members. And so again, it's actually opened us up to be able to hire different types of people in our company that we would not have been able to hire before, which that's a really, really big deal. We've also been able to align those client success managers with our major accounts, what we would kind of call on-call accounts, where we have multiple projects going on with the same client. In managing that relationship, that client success manager becomes that single point of contact for that client, again, making it easy instead of having to deal with 4 or 5 different project managers. And Blake and I were talking about this. We could have 4 project managers that are all really, really good, but they're going to get 4 different experiences because those are 4 different people, right? And so again, by being able to pull it underneath that one CSM, that client success manager, we can get a really consistent experience with that client. They have a trusted partner that they work with. They don't have to know the internal workings of our company. If they're going to do a stormwater project, well, who do I talk to? I talk to my client success manager, because he's going to connect me with the right resources in the company. And he's going to make sure that all these projects are working together. And it's interesting as well, where we've seen some internal efficiencies from this. One, all the billing goes through that individual. So we ask them, when do you want to get a bill, right? When's the right time for you to get an invoice from us, so that you've got time to process it and send it? All that goes through one point of contact. There's a nice write-up that goes with every one of those invoices explaining what they're actually paying for. Just those little things that client success manager can do to really make that engagement very easy with that client. They know they've got a trusted partner on the other end that is looking after their best interest. They're seeing opportunities, saying, well, wait a minute, you're getting ready to do a greenway, but you've got a stormwater issue right there as well. Let's put those 2 projects together. Let's accomplish a bigger goal between these 2 projects, so they're not individual projects. If they were being handled individually, those opportunities may have been missed. That's how we're adding value back to the client. So our clients really enjoy that experience. When we pull together our scope and fee, we actually have a line item. There's a charge for that experience, right? And so again, that all goes back into setting that expectation with the client, understanding that they recognize value there. Now, if the client says, I don't see value in that, that's great. We can put you in a typical project manager type role. But again, more and more of our clients are saying, no, I want to stay in this CSM model. So now we have, I think we're up to 10 CSMs. Each one of them manage about 5 to 6 clients apiece. It has made us so much more scalable in our industry. And again, we've been able to bring in talent that, some of those are non-engineers that are managing those projects. They're really good project managers. They're past city managers, or they're, past managers in other industries. So again, it's been a force multiplier for us as well. At the end of the day, it's made us more profitable. You mentioned day sales outstanding. We've seen our DSO number continue to go down because, again, we're making that invoicing easier. It's interesting too, Ryan. I know when we first started going through client experience and doing the client feedback surveys, everything's in a category like budget, quality, communication, those kind of things. The lowest category, invoicing. Consistently invoicing. That is the number one pain point probably for almost any industry out there, any client, is how do I pay my bill? And so we listened to that. We made some changes, just like you've done there. We've started doing some credit card. We've started putting again, a really nice narrative that goes along. Heaven forbid that an engineer would have a really clear invoice
Right.
they send out, with 20
here's your
pages,
summary.
right, with 20 pages of backup and hours and timesheet notes all over it. So again, how do you make that? How do you get it to them at the right time?
Right.
Because again, they've got to get it to their porch. There's a process they have to follow. Those little small things, those are the things that, again, that client success manager really focuses on and makes that connection with the client. It has been fantastic. Our retention rates with our clients are, up in the 90 to 95%. When we get a client, we never lose a client.
Wow, fantastic.
We've continued to see our new business grow. We use this in all of our marketing and branding. It's been very transformative of the way we do
Honestly,
business.
I think that I know that law firms that have more commoditized business really treat their legal assistants as the client success manager, right? That's the first point of contact. You go to get your will redone. You're only dealing with the legal assistant, the paralegal, and maybe an associate until the day you sign, right? Because it's their job to make that experience smooth and quick and efficient. And then you meet with the attorney, right? But that poor attorney doesn't have to be involved in every step. It doesn't have to, take my credit card and figure out how to pay it. So that's fantastic.
One thing I just want to add, and you reminded me of it, but one of the key approaches to our communication strategy has been to be flexible. And so with some people who they're an analyst, or they're a data person and they want to look at the data and they don't want to have to do the interviews or whatever, they can assign someone like an associate project manager or something
Like a proxy.
Yes. And so,
great.
and again, sort of leveraging their strengths. This person is on the front lines. They're dealing with billing or making sure that things keep moving. And then the project director or the PD can focus on, what they do best. And so that's one thing I think that's worked really well, is giving people a lot of flexibility, and giving even leaders flexibility to say, I want to centralize this function, or I want this to be done by all of my staff, and, meet people where they're at. So I think that's part of the client experience, like you were saying early on. It's really key.
One of the firms we've worked with the longest in the architecture industry, their utilization rates are consistently in the bottom 10% in the industry. And their effective multiplier or net profit are almost always in the top 2 or 3%. And it's because they're getting the right people doing the right job and doing the stuff that they love, so that those who are really good at doing the billable work can bill like crazy at very effective and very high rates, because they get to spend all day doing the stuff they love, not making copies or doing stuff that really there's someone better suited to do. So it's a really great point about getting the right people in the right role to do what they're best at.
Yeah.
Great way to do it.
Passionate about. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, again,
Exactly.
You don't have, with our CSMs, you're not having to message to them of this is what they know what they need.
Right.
I mean, that their client empathy is off the chart, right? And again, when you do that, it just makes it really click and come together.
Well, and you talked about the client experience or the employee experience too, right? And you said this earlier, but it's one of my favorite adages too. The client experience can never be better than the employee experience, right? So if you've got people who are dragging through their days because they know they have to do a bunch of stuff they don't want to touch, they're not going to be able to deliver the kind of experience that the clients need in order to stay long term. So I think it's a win-win.
Yeah. So questions from the audience. We've heard a lot of great stuff from the panel. Any other questions? I got a question up here. Would you mind using the microphone so the remote audience can hear us? Thank you.
Brandy, I was curious to know more about how you conducted the client interviews. Were they in person? Did you record them? Did you have standard questions?
So all of the interviews that we did were pre-COVID, and we had a very long list with multiple categories of questions. And what we would do in our prep meeting with the client team, anybody who had touched the client over the past, I think we did 1.5 years, was part of the client team for that meeting. And we would review the questions and we would ask them, the team themselves, what kinds of issues have you dealt with? Have you had to overcome? Have you heard any complaints? Did you experience any friction with invoicing? Whatever. And I would highlight the questions that I felt would probably be most appropriate for the client. And then when the managing partner and I would go, we would have the same literally notebook in front of us to make sure there were no distractions, no laptops or cell phones. And we would just go through the notebook and manually take notes. And it was much akin to what you were saying when you invited them in. I mean, we would just set the stage. We want the good, bad, and the ugly. And sometimes we would go completely off script if they had other things they wanted to address with us. But we did try to standardize the approach and then let the interview fall where it may, kind of a thing. And we ended up getting, some consistent data points. We would often start with, a satisfaction question. But for the most part, we got the information that the client needed us to have about the team that they were dealing with. And again, then we would come back, we would take our notes, I would put it into a full report. And actually, Wicker Park Group that helped train us had kind of some standardized forms that they used. And so she gave us sort of a model of report that helps you highlight the most important themes and any specific call outs for the team, and then really summarize by category the feedback that you received and any action items you needed to take. So it was a very time-consuming process, but well worth it, right? If what the firm is paying for in that instance is really my time and about let's say 2 hours of the managing partner's time to prep and go do the interview, then when you're done, you're getting this just treasure trove of information about the client relationship. So that is how we standardized it. And then, like I said before, the other feedback that we did was the survey for strategic planning, and Chandra helped us make sure that was consistent from clients. And we also did internal surveys that she helped us format so that we could have comparable information both from our clients and from our employees in a few categories to make sure that we could see ourselves both internally and externally on some of the same key points.
I've seen firms that are already doing electronic feedback show up to the interviews with the feedback they've collected, oftentimes from multiple stakeholders, particularly if you have a more complex relationship, and say, hey, here's what we've heard your people say about our team. Here's the things we've learned that needed some work. Here's what we did to address them. Here's some successes we found. What else do we need to know? So that multi-channel approach is really very strong at being able to listen broadly through multiple different channels.
And I would say on that point, I'm not sure in your firms what your client ownership is like, but in law firms, you typically have an originating attorney who at some point in the last 400 years has, had a relationship with that client. And then you have different matter attorneys, so different project attorneys, right, that bill for specific projects. They may not all talk to each other on a regular basis. The originating attorney could have no relationship with the new people that are sending us work. And so that whole client team approach that we take to do the briefing before we would go into the interview was really important because we didn't have any other sources of feedback, and we didn't have a collective. We didn't even have a CRM where we were storing that information. We didn't have an experience database where we had talked about this. We might have some individual matter reports that we had used for award submissions, but we really didn't have a whole lot of data on the front end. So getting that group together and saying, like, tell us what you know. Who do you talk to? Who do you touch? Who pays the bills on your specific matter? What feedback do you know about? What issues should we be aware of? Is there anything we should not ask about because it's, maybe been recently dealt with? We did have a situation where I think there was a client who had a waiver, so that we could do work for another client, and then they got frustrated during that process. It was like, don't step on those toes. Don't poke that bear, right? We know it exists. We've already addressed it. Let's focus on the things that we can do something about going forward. So that meeting was our, convergence.
A pre-brief.
Yeah.
There's a question in the back.
Yeah, my question is, as my firm is kind of, I'll use the word immature in our CX journey. And I hear you need to have the right people in the right roles. So how did you navigate getting people who will engage in that client experience and relationship building with your clients and allowing those who won't or just won't take part in it. I get they're not good at it, but it's kind of like we're asking them to do extra. So how do you differentiate, or how did you navigate that process of growth where you were able to differentiate between the two?
So we struggle with that, because again, to your point, there's value, there's equal value on both sides of both sides of that coin with that employee, right? So that was number one, is like, how do we message this where it doesn't feel like we're demoting or promoting somebody? That was a little bit tricky. So the way we went about that was this. And in fact, I should have brought some graphics with me. We do a lot of internal graphics, a lot, we like words and pictures and video and all the media because everybody consumes things differently. But by developing this client success management group, it was just another form of delivery, right? Just like our stormwater group or our utility group or whatever. So they're all equal peers. Those were individuals that had a desire to be over there. So first of all, when we did that client listening piece, you could tell from that day who had a lot of interest and who didn't have a lot of interest. So there were some internal good things that I'm telling a lot of internal secrets I shouldn't tell now.
No, that's great.
But there was some internal psychology behind this too as well. Okay, let's find out who the real people are that are like excited. It's like, I'm putting sticky notes all over the place, and the other person is just kind of like, why am I here, right? So they kind of self-selected, number one. By building that second group, that CSM group, again, they became equal peers. It wasn't like we were promoting somebody above somebody else. So it was a lateral move for that individual. When we did the messaging was, hey, at the end of the day, we know you've got a lot on your plate. You've got to answer to accounting. You got to do your billing. You've got to deal with a client. You got to get these projects out on schedule. You've got more work than you can probably get done right now. So this is a way for us to be able to segment some of these tasks that has to be completed for our business. And this will make our company more scalable, right, at the end of the day. And so we wrapped it around of what is our grand vision of we're wanting to grow our company. This is one of those mechanisms of how we're going to grow Withers Ravenel. We're going to have to compartmentalize some of these tasks that we do. We're going to have to break some things apart in order to be able to scale, because we just can't go hire enough talent to be able to go do all this. So at the end of the day, it was very well received. And in fact, one of my coworkers, John Anatola, fantastic guy, and he will tell you he loves the work, man. He wants to do the work. And we had him come out and do a nice little video, had him speak to his peers to say, this has been the best thing ever for me. I love this. This whole CSM model is great, because I don't have to do it.
I get to be an engineer.
Right. I get to be an engineer. That's what I went to school for. I get to be this great engineer. And so, again, having those other individuals in the company be that champion, tell that story. But yeah, we as an executive team, we really struggle with that. It's like, we've got to be really careful that all of a sudden we don't elevate this CSM like, oh, they're better than the delivery. No, man. It's just another piece of the puzzle, right? We can have the best CSMs in the world. If the work doesn't get done,
That's a problem.
guess what? That's a real problem. Yeah, you want to talk about bad client experience? Don't need schedules, do bad work. That's
Right.
Again, as you said earlier, right? That's expected, right? You don't come.
Those
to
are
the
the gotta
table.
haves.
Right.
Those
You
are
don't
the
come.
table stakes.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't come to the table if you don't have those things. So again, it's really about that. We also weave business development into here too as well. So the BD guys work really closely with the CSMs. I was thinking about earlier, we send out feedback requests scheduled when we start up a project. This project has a year-long schedule. We've already programmed in every feedback request for the next year at startup. So it's already there. It's part of our startup process, our client onboarding process. We message to the client, this is why it's important for you to participate in this, right? This is the value you're going to get out of it. This isn't really about us. This is for you to basically explain how we can better serve you every day. And again, just building all those processes, it did not happen overnight. Again, this has been a 5-year journey, and we still have a long way to go. We're certainly not, the gold standard for this either, in my opinion. But just those small changes, some of those things that we've done, the impacts, I could go on for hours, and I won't bore you, but it has really been transformational inside of our company, and it's really built some really strong teams of people that are like, hey, we're doing our part, and we're working with another group of people that are doing their part, and it's really building a collaborative environment, and somewhat of a matrix organization too, as well, where again, it's not just everybody has to be everything.
Right.
They can be that one thing that they really want to be and be it really well.
Right.
I was going to say my great grandmother used to say it takes all kinds. And I feel like that is the absolute truth in building out your client experience. And, earlier when I said there are labels in the legal industry, finders, minders, binders, and grinders, and making any one of those more important really skews the system, right? Yeah. So, finders for us would be your BD guy, and the minders your project manager. The binder is the CSM, right? And the grinder is the person behind the scenes going to get it all done. And I think recognizing that each of them brings something important to the table, letting them all work together is key, because trying to make someone who is a finder be a grinder, not going to result in the good work that you need, right? So I love that, being able to just identify strengths and let people embrace those strengths and still be considered a valid and equally important part of the team.
Right.
Yeah.
Key.
So as we bring this to a close, I asked each of you to have like a sentence or two word of advice or next steps. So not like 47 paragraphs, but what's the concise takeaway? No, I'm looking all the way down this table. Great stuff over here. But just to honor the time in the schedule, what's the brief word of advice you would give someone who's either just getting started, or they feel stuck, or they want to take the next step? How would you help them move forward on their client experience journey?
This is not helpful, but just get started, right? Find one thing that is an easy win that will help you get some momentum, that will help you get some support internally. And it can be as little as the pay my bill button. It could be bigger, right?
Yep.
But just start somewhere, because once you get that snowball rolling, it'll take care of itself.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And the other thing I would add is celebrate. When you win, celebrate. When we don't quite hit the mark, manage that, but celebrate all the great things you're doing. So, every one of those little wins are just another step on that journey that you're going, and make sure that we're always talking about that.
Well, I agree with both of you. And what I was going to say is be patient. And it was really important for us to focus on like the wins, like the low hanging fruit, and getting the largest business unit EVP say at his all hands, I want everyone as part of this program, was like a big win. And it took time to get to that point. And so we just needed to be patient and, look for the quick wins, and then communicate them, share them. And then that actually set up a great, sort of a healthy competition with the other business units. Once they saw that this large business unit was participating, they kind of felt like they had to come in as well, because we were sharing who's participating. So it was a little bit of a competition, but in a nice way, in a good way.
Yeah.
Great. Excellent, guys. Thank you very much for all your insights. I appreciate it. Those of you who joined us virtually, if you loved this panel, we got 5 different panels coming to you across the country. We have Columbus, Ohio, Atlanta, Fort Worth, Anaheim, and Madison, Wisconsin. So if this was cool and you want to see another group of 3 excellent industry peers telling their stories and answering your questions, go to clientexperience.org and join us there. Thank you very much. We appreciate it, and have a great day.